Welcome to Donkey Learning IT. Today we're gonna have a detailed look and a teardown of a Cisco ASA 5505 Advanced Security Appliance which is a firewall from Cisco. We're gonna do it as usual donkey style, which means that first of all we're gonna have a rough look on the hardware itself. Then I'm gonna open the case. I'm gonna remove the motherboard and I'm gonna go over the components from the perspective of a CCNA security or a CCNP security standpoint. So for someone who is doing a certification, it's definitely the first part of the video should be rather interesting. Then in the second part of the video, I'm gonna go into very deep detail of what the individual components are doing inside the motherboard. And this part is mainly intended for people who are either repair technicians or who are deeply into applied electronics. And I'm quite sure they would be interested to know what is inside in such an appliance. In order to remove the top cover, you need to first remove the 3 Phillips type screws from the bottom of the unit. Once you are done with that, you just flip the thing over. And now you can just lift the case. And now we are already getting a rough overview of what is going inside this appliance. Once we have removed the top cover, we have access to most of the components. As I already mentioned, the first portion of the video, I'm gonna make only a very brief overview of what is going on for a CCNA security certification. Then I'm gonna take the board out and I'm gonna make a 10 times magnification of the particular components, and we're gonna really go into detail what each individual component is doing on the motherboard. Before we go any further, I need to point out that the Cisco ASA 5505 and 010 series firewalls are not based on the normal RISC CPUs what you find in the Cisco routers, and this was a purposeful choice by Cisco. Namely, they wanted their firewalls to operate using a completely different operating system and using completely different hardware, because this way, if by some miracle someone managed to break into their iOS or Internet operating system, then they wanted that any of such bugs or security holes should not be exposed, hopefully, in a completely different OS and in a different hardware. This is why, instead of the typical RISC CPUs, here they are using an x86 compatible CPU, which is pretty much a run-of-the-mill CPU, so to say. And instead of the typical iOS, in this flash card, they are actually having the so-called ASA OS, even though some people still call it the iOS. And at the end of the day, this is nothing else but a proprietary 32-bit Linux kernel running on an x86 machine, pretty much. Below this big heatsink, there is an AMD Geode LX600 CPU running at 500 MHz. So if you do a show version, you're gonna see pretty much that most of these CPUs are running at 500 MHz. Then next to the x86 CPU, there is a standard DDR memory module. It's a PC3200 DDR memory module. Even though some people claim that they have good success replacing the memory module with some third-party modules which are not sold by Cisco, I think that most of the time it is a better idea to try to hunt these modules down from eBay which are made particularly for the Cisco ASA series of routers, because you're going to get a better success of getting the modules working in these devices. In the middle of the case, there is an AMD Geode companion processor, which is communicating with the main CPU through a 33 megahertz PCI bus. And this is pretty much the Nord bridge, or equivalent to the Nord bridge of an average personal computer. The main functionality of this chip is that it communicates with the CPU. Of course, then it has to communicate with the compact flash. Theoretically, it also communicates with the USB ports, despite that the USB ports, as far as I know, doesn't have any functionality, at least as of ASA OS version 8 and 9, I couldn't find any functionality for the USB ports. Nevertheless, the companion processor does have the functionality. It does all kinds of I/O. Furthermore, it has a real-time clock built inside the chip, and this 3-volt lithium-ion battery here is providing the power for this real-time clock. Next to the CPU and the companion processor, we're gonna find a Marvell Octa PHY, which is having practically 8 physical I/O going to the 8 ports at the front, which are then practically nothing else but just 810/100 megabit per second RJ45 Ethernet ports. Next to the lithium-ion battery, which provides power for the real-time clock, we're gonna find a 2 megabyte flash. This flash chip is not the chip which contains your ASA OS. Instead, it contains the so-called ROMMON in Cisco terms. So practically this would be the equivalent of a BIOS of an average x86 personal computer. This large flash chip or card is 128 megabytes, and this one is the one which contains the ASA OS. So what happens is that when the device boots, it boots first from this ROMMON chip, and then it takes over via the so-called boot system commands. Then it will start to load or uncompress the ASA OS, loading it from this 128 megabyte compact flash card and decompressing it inside the 512 megabyte of memory. At least this device is with 512 megabyte of RAM module. This chip here with the black heatsink is nothing else but the so-called onboard accelerator, which is a field programmable gate array. And what it does is that it takes care of taking your VPN connections. So practically it does really complex mathematics rather fast compared to an x86 CPU, because the FPGAs have so many input-output pins that they can easily do lots of mathematics in the same time, which would completely bog down an x86 CPU. To give you the full story behind where is the real muscle inside the ASA 5505, I have to show you one of the chips which you normally don't see because this is already on the other side of the main board. And this is a specialized Cavium Nitrox Lite, which is a so-called security nanoprocessor. And this little thing is pretty much like an ASIC, an application-specific integrated circuit. And it does all the RSA and the Diffie-Hellman algorithm and so forth. And it does all the triple DES, and all these kinds of encryptions happen mainly inside this hardware. And they also use, of course, the FPGA, which I just showed from the other side of the board. I would say this is the crown jewel of the whole board, this specialized security microprocessor from Cavium. And with this name, this Nitrox, it pretty much sounds like Fast and Furious. I like this name very much. In my opinion, when Cisco have designed this ASA series firewalls, what they had in mind is pretty much the following. They thought, well, look, we are the leaders when it comes to routing and switching, so we better make a really strong device also when it comes to security. And in my view, this is why they have put in this specialized security microprocessor and also the FPGA, because this way, this tiny little board is really able to push through about 175 to 200 megabit per second when it comes to encryption, which is a surprising amount from so little hardware. So one needs to understand that without this specialized CPU or security processor and without the FPGA, this whole board would pretty much be nothing else but just a glorified Linux PC. This small black chip right here, where is my pointing stick, this is your NV RAM or non-volatile RAM. This is where the startup config is being stored when you save it. The smaller chip here in the corner is a little bit specialized chip. What it does is that it communicates with the flash, and it does on the fly security communication with the flash card. On the left hand side of the unit, we're gonna have nothing else but pretty much just the power supply. We're gonna look at the second portion of the video on all these parts in a 10 times magnification, and I'm gonna discuss in detail what they do. I think for the CCNAs it's not really making a lot of sense to go into such deep detail. Nevertheless, I think you should still keep on watching the video so that you have an idea of what really happens with your packets when they come inside such a security appliance, because I'm really gonna tear it down and we're gonna look at each individual component and we're gonna talk about what they do. Now we are switching over then, and we're gonna go into detail from the perspective of a repair technician, and we're gonna look at the power supply portion of the board first. I need to point out that this device is powered through this port here via minus 48 volt DC, and these two Ethernet ports here are able to provide also power to other devices, like as an example, wireless access points or IP phones. Since the device have been designed relying on this minus 48 volt DC PoE standard, the power supply part of the board is surprisingly complex. The power comes in through this 2-pin port here. Then it has to go through this switching field effect transistor here, which is of course being fed by an IC from the other side of the board. I will show you later. But considering that we need some sort of minimal voltages, some so-called standby voltages to get the minimal logic going on the board before we are able to switch this transistor here, what they did, at least I needed to trace the PCB out with a multimeter. So what I found is that there are these two diodes here, and these two diodes are responsible for making the standby voltage. So the 48 volt comes in, then goes inside these diodes, then through this coil here, and after the coil it goes into a Micrel serial regulator, which then gonna make plus 3.3 volt DC, which is then used as the standby voltage to feed the portion of the power supply, which then will start up the real power supplies. This filtering capacitor here, at the beginning I thought that it is used for filtering for the real unit. However, after tracing out the PCB, I found that it is actually the filter capacitor for these two PoE ports here at the front. And of course, these self-resettable bimetal fuses here are also for these two PoE ports. So this portion of the PCB is not really related to the inner power distribution. Instead, it is responsible for distributing the power for these two PoE ports. Talking about the power distribution, of course, we're gonna need to mention what happens now with these two RJ45 ports here in the front, which are then powered or they provide power over Ethernet for other devices. So this chip here is the controller chip for this PoE, and even though I tried to look around in the database, I could not really figure out what this particular chip is, and I've been playing naughty and I have disassembled this other ASA 5505 which I have, and I found out that this is a linear technology chip. At least in other models they use the linear technology chip, 1-to-1 pin compatible with this IC, for which I could not find the data. You're gonna find the part numbers in the description of this video, so you can look the databases up for yourself if you want to. Nevertheless, after I found out that this is pretty much a linear technology LTC 4259, then I was able to look up that chip, and that is clearly a quad PoE controller, and it does of course the IEEE 802.3 PoE standard communication with the device which is being powered. And I think that these things next to it are then dual field effect transistors, which are then responsible for switching the power through these self-resettable bimetal fuses, and of course the necessary Schottky diodes for the preventing for the backward flow into the two PoE ports at the front. As I already mentioned, the main power controller chip is on the other side of the board, and this Maxim 5003 is responsible for driving that field effect transistor which I just showed you earlier, which is then chopping the 48 volt DC, and through chopping the 48 volt DC it makes different kinds of voltages out of a small power transformer. So this Maxim 5003 gonna give the driver signal to the gate of this field effect transistor, which gonna chop then the 48 volt DC coming to this power transformer here, and through this power transformer then we're gonna get going through this Schottky diode here and also a filtering inductor. Then we're gonna get here 12 volt DC filtered on these two capacitors. Then this 12 volt DC is being used as an input voltage to provide input power for smaller buck converters, and in turn these individual buck converters gonna power the CPU, the companion processor, and all the components of course which need different voltages on the board itself. The controller chips for these buck converters are the Maxim 1876 chips right here, which are dual PWM controllers, and next to the PWM controller chips, of course, we're gonna find different field effect transistors together with the inductors and the given filtering, which gonna create these smaller voltages in order of 1 to 2 volt and of course 3.3 volt, which is used in the glue logic. Next to the PoE controller chip, we're gonna find the clock circuit for the AMD Geode CPU. Right next to this clock synthesizer chip, we're gonna find a 4 kilobit EEPROM, which is the so-called NV or non-volatile RAM inside this ASA 5505. So most of the configuration is actually stored inside this tiny little chip here. Next to the AMD Geode companion processor and this field programmable gate array, we're gonna find a 32 kilohertz crystal and of course the lithium-ion battery for the real-time clock. If you are wondering why is exactly this frequency used for real-time clock generation, well, it's pretty simple. This number here is nothing else but 2 on the power of 15, so it means that it is rather easy to calculate how long should take 1 second. And even though people say, well, I mean, wouldn't it be easier to make a 1 hertz crystal? Well, the issue is that the lower the frequency, the larger the crystal needs to be. So imagine how immense a 1 hertz crystal would be. So it would be practically not possible to put it inside a device. It would be huge. And of course it would cost a lot of money to actually make such a precise quartz crystal. The FPGA itself, I would bet my bottom dollar on it that most probably it is a Xilinx Spartan series FPGA. I tried to remove the heatsink, but they really made a good job on epoxy gluing it to the chip. So sorry, I cannot show you the chip itself, but as I told you, I'd say, knowing the Cisco devices, that 90% of the time this will be a Xilinx FPGA here. Next to the real-time clock circuit, we're gonna find a 16 megabit flash chip, which is 2 megabytes. And this flash chip is nothing else but the ROM-on, which would be equivalent to the BIOS in an average PC. Then we're gonna find an Octa PHY chip from Marvell. So this chip inside contains 8 physical I/O going to the front, and practically this is the chip which is doing the I/O communication via the Ethernet standard through the standard wire. Next to the physical input-output chip, then we are going towards the flash chip and the processors which are then communicating with the flash chip. And even though some people think that you can easily put in any kind of flash in your Cisco router or switch, well, for your lab, it's indeed, most of the time, it does work. However, keep in mind that if you have a device which is under warranty, most of the time they're gonna ask you to send them the output of show tech support. And if you don't use a Cisco released compact flash card, most probably they will not support your device. So keep that in mind. Next to the flash chip, we're gonna find 2 chips here. One of them is clearly a microchip PIC 18LF2, I cannot read it on the screen. I will put it in the description below. I must confess that I do not know, at least I could not figure out what is this microchip here doing. This is a microcontroller, so if you have any idea what it could do, please just leave your comment in the description below. I have some theories, but I'm really not quite sure what the functionality of this microcontroller is. Next to the PIC microcontroller, we're gonna find a little bit of a mystery device. At least that is what I thought at the beginning. I think that in this particular case, they are doing security via obfuscation, and I could not really figure out what this part is until I have opened my other ASA, and I found that this is an Atmel 12836, which is a security microcontroller, and it is communicating, of course, with the flash card itself. And I think what it is doing is that Cisco wanna reduce the chances of any kind of data getting away as much as possible. So I think that they don't want to have anything clear text inside either the card or anything like that, where you could, I mean, if you have physical access to the device, you could just remove the card. So I think that through this chip, they are really doing on-the-fly encryption of some of the data, like, as an example, keys and so forth, which are found in this flash chip here. They are then encoding it directly via these specialized RISC instructions, which are built inside this chip, to the flash card itself. Next to these two chips, we're just gonna find the main x86 compatible CPU under this heatsink, which is again very strongly epoxy glued to the CPU itself, so I could not remove it. And yeah, this is pretty much a boring x86 CPU. Next to the CPU, we're gonna find some minimal glue logic. This is here a Texas Instruments 16-bit I2C bus to GPIO expander chip. I would expect that this chip is responsible for communicating with this external card that you can plug in here. I'm not quite sure. Please let me know if you have more detailed information eventually. Next to the CPU, also, as I already told you, we're gonna find the DDR memory RAM module, which is, it's a somewhat run-of-the-mill DDR module. And in the very corner here, right next to the front USB, we're gonna find a next experience DDR bus termination power linear regulator. So this chip gonna make half times the power necessary to power the DDR chips, because the DDR bus need to be terminated via these termination resistors here, that there is no feedback coming back. And considering that for every clock signal we're gonna have a bit taken both when the clock goes up and when the clock falls down, this is why it's called DDR, or double data rate, compared to the SDR, or single data rate. This is why we need to keep this bus at half of the voltage powering the ICs themselves. After we have looked at the component side of the PCB, now I'm gonna turn it around and we're gonna look at the other side, what goes on there. And I think that there is a surprising amount of components on this side, because normally whenever you turn the board around, it's like, you know, when the police comes and they say, well, there is nothing to see here, just move along. And in this case, actually the real muscle, as I already mentioned, of this whole board is this smaller chip on the other side of the board, where hidden, so to say, this Cavium Nitrox chip right here. And we have a couple more active components on this side of the board. We're gonna have a closer look on them as well. And of course, besides the active components, we're gonna get lots of these passive decoupling capacitors for the CPU and for the terminating resistors for the DDR RAM and so forth. At the bottom of the board, we're gonna find some field effect transistors, which are then driven by these two Maxim 1870 series PWM controller chips, which I've shown you from the top of the PCB. And these field effect transistors are then of course responsible for generating the smaller voltages for the CPU, RAM, and so forth. At the bottom there is also this high voltage Maxim 5003, which, as I mentioned, it's gonna give the driving signal to the field effect transistor at the power input here. On the other side of the board, right below the CPU, we're gonna find this Next Experience 1617, which is not surprisingly a temperature sensor IC, and of course it will then communicate and it will tell the temperature of the CPU for the other devices and eventually do some shutdown if there is an overheating. Close to the front USB ports and also at the other USB port at the other side of the unit, we're gonna find these Micrel 2026 chips, and these are nothing else but the controllers for the power through the USB output itself. So it's no wonder that they are located close to the USB ports. Then there are also two analog devices, RS-232 transceivers on the board, which are then of course communicating with the front console cable. Considering that the console is working through the RS-32 serial connection, no wonder to have some of these chips here. So what they do is that they are taking this plus 3.3 volt signal, and through these charge pump capacitors, what you see here around them, they're gonna provide plus minus 12 or even plus minus 15 volt DC going out towards the serial cable, because the serial communication relies on a lot higher voltages. This sums up the fun for today what we had with this Cisco ASA 5505. So I hope you have learned something from this video, and if nothing else, well, the take-home message is that this little thing here is a lot more complicated than I would have expected. And yeah, I hope you have learned about the inner life of a Cisco firewall, and now you have a better understanding of what is happening inside when there is a packet coming into the device.